Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. I'm so excited to have my fabulous friend back, Elyse, also known as your period PT on Instagram. And a quick heads up that this will be as a podcast and also on YouTube. So if you want to have a look at us and put our faces to the words, then by all means join on. I'll put the links in the show notes. But let's start with something very exciting, which is balloons rustling, red balloons. It's 1 year since Elyse got her period back, and so freaking exciting. 1 whole year.
1 whole year and 10 periods later. It's absolutely insane. So what better way to celebrate my period anniversary than have a lovely chat with you?
Hey. No, I was so excited because I love the idea that, people who've never lost their period don't tend to celebrate it. It's just like, oh, it's here again. Oh, it's here again. But if you've lost yours and you got it back, or you're in the process of getting back, period talk's actually really exciting. So when you said it's your period anniversary, I was like, yes, this is great. And then we kind of decided it would be a good time to reflect on the journey.
Yes, perfect time, and what recovery has taught not only me, but you as well.
Yes, because there's so many lessons in there, isn't there?
So many, but you've just got to be open to learning them, I think, is the key.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one people tend to struggle with, and you and I both fall into that category, is the patience, like waiting for that first period to come. And when it does come, it's waiting for the next one and waiting for the next one. And I guess it's not until you really learn to trust your body and trust what you're doing with your life that suddenly you don't have to wait for your next period, because you're actually confident it's going to come, because you're eating well and you're training well, and everything's in sync. Because I wonder how you felt. Obviously there was a waiting game when you first got your period back, but for the first 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, did you always checking the app, when's it due, when's it going to come? That feeling doesn't just go once that first period arrives. It lingers, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think obviously you have to be patient to get your first period, but then in my experience, I had to wait longer to get my second period than I did my first. So there was a whole new waiting game and a whole new lesson to be learned between my first and second period. And that really taught me, A, patience is a virtue, and B, letting go of control. That was a really big lesson I learned too, which I think goes hand in hand with patience. Kind of, because you don't know when your period's going to come. And even though you get your first period, you still don't exactly know when your second period's going to come. You can the tricky part is you can kind of create a timeline in your head between your first period, your second, your third, when you can go back to exercise, all of that, which I think is really, really difficult. And I think there's struggles to get your first period, but then there's also different kind of struggles that you go through to get your second period and then your third. It doesn't, like you said, it just doesn't stop when you get your first period. It kind of really starts. And it's not to say that recovery hasn't already started. It's just a whole different type of recovery. It's like a different race.
Yeah. And it's learning what's going to make sure your period stays, because we've gone to this eat more, rest sort of lifestyle. And it's natural for a lot of us to sort of want more after that. Like, I want to move a little bit more, and I want to return back to certain activities that excite me and that are really fun for me. And it's that delicate dance between, well, how much can I increase so that my period comes back? And I guess trusting the process of not doing too much too soon. So when mine come back, I think my second one come pretty spot on, like 30 days after. But then I got really excited and decided to start running. And factor in, I was never really a runner anyway, but I was currently walking every day because that was my sort of HA recovery protocol. And I thought, oh, why not run a few sprints during my walk? And needless to say, that third period didn't show up when it was meant to, and it skipped through to the time of when my fourth was due. When you didn't get your second period, I guess within normal time frames of a standard cycle, was that because you had changed anything, or just because your body was still sort of waking up?
So honestly, I didn't really change much, but also honestly, I did a little bit more like Pilates, like glute and core work, like only 15 minutes. that was probably the only thing I really changed. But what I think happened is my mentality changed. So I got my first period back. So I was like, sweet, I don't need to gain any more weight. Yeah. So I was still very upset and I guess focused on the weight gain part of it, that my body kind of felt that resistance towards recovery. Although I didn't change anything drastically and consciously, I think somewhere subconscious, my brain was just like, we know you're not okay with this. And that didn't make my body feel safe. And I ended up gaining more weight, and obviously nothing terrible happened. So that kind of comes back to the whole letting go of control, because it was just so freeing for the first time in like the last decade of my life to not have to worry about how much I weighed or what I looked like. And I think that really let my body just relax.
Yeah, it's that last release, isn't it? When you're not sort of consciously telling yourself it's okay, it actually is okay. Because that's a massive shift. And sometimes people don't think that that's achievable. And it absolutely can take longer for some people than others. But there is a point, and that could be when you've already gotten your period back. Like, it doesn't have to be before your period, where it's not consciously reminding yourself, like, I love and accept this body. It's sort of not even a thought. Like, I'm just glad to have it. And sometimes we've talked about this before, that extreme of self body positive can be taken out of context, because sometimes actually loving yourself is actually having a very neutral position about yourself, which is just like, I am what I am. I'm not super thrilled. I'm not devastated. I'm just good.
Yeah. And you're just not thinking about your body so much. Like, it's just not the
it's a bit
most
of a
important
nothing
thing. Yeah.
And the food transformation is the same. It's not always, it's no longer sort of, can I have this? Can I have that? That's the devil. This is the angel, all that sort of thing. It's just food. And it's not calorie counting in your head subconsciously. It's like, no, it's just food.
Yeah.
And those transitions take quite some time to get there. And there is a lot of mind work involved. But I guess even if you've got your period back, it's such an important thing to still keep chasing those freedoms, because everyone deserves that freedom.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another thing that really important that you touched on, is you've got to keep monitoring that and keep chasing it, because even after you get your third period and you can return to exercise, there's still work that needs to be put in, and there's still a lot of patience that is needed. So like, I like to think of it as that patience that you were taught waiting for your first, second, and third period is really going to help you when you reintroduce exercise and you start doing the different things that you love to do, because you are going to have to reintroduce it slowly, and you are going to have to be patient with your body. And I just think that's not really talked about too much either. Just kind of like the road out of recovery. We always kind of focus on the road in, but not so much
there's no exit
what it's
strategy.
like. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I kind of coach clients through by saying, we're going to keep everything the same, but we're going to add in one workout. It's going to be 30 minutes. All right. Moderate intensity. We're still not going to go into HIIT straight away. We're going to do that one session a week for the next 4 weeks. See if your period comes. It does, tick, tick, tick. Fantastic. All right, let's add in a second one. Or we can add on a little bit of duration to the one we've already got. Or we can add on a little bit of intensity to the one we've already got. So there's so many ways you can actually next level it. But it's just about being really strict with yourself, which kind of goes against what we learned through HAs. It was like, no, live freely and relax and surrender. But the return of exercise, it's like, you almost need to be as strict as what you were when you're obsessive, because it's like, all right, you're excited, but don't get carried away. Let's just take it one step at a time. And at least we can get the reassurance of the period coming, that everything's okay. And we can continue to step forward rather than, go a little bit crazy with our excitement. And then our period stops again. And it's like, oh my gosh, this again.
Yeah, I had a very, very similar experience. I was returning to exercise, and I'd started very slowly. Sounds like how you coach your clients through it. I started very slowly, and I got to the stage of where I finally introduced a couple of weight sessions a week. And I was asked to play on a netball team, and netball was my sport growing up, and I loved it. For anyone that's not from Australia, it's kind of like basketball, but just go Google it.
But don't bounce it.
Yeah, but don't bounce it. You don't run with the ball, but just Google it. Because I know it's like, it's not a thing in like North America. I know this from Steve. He had
I
no
never
idea.
thought of it until you just mentioned, like you went to describe netball, because in my mind, everyone knows
Knows what
what
netball is.
netball is. But then as you brought it up, I'm like, oh, wait, how common is netball? And it's a weird
fairly
sport.
common.
It's common, but it's a bit interesting on the movement pattern front. But yes, everyone have a little Google if you're not sure.
So I had been asked to play in a team for netball, and I played netball all the way through my teenage years. I was quite at like a high level of it. So it like consumed my teenage life. And I thought, yeah, like I was working with Sarah Liz King at the time, and I said, look, do you think I could work this into my training program that we'd already made? And she said, like, yep, I don't see any reason why we couldn't, but it is your body at the end of the day. Like, you have to monitor how you do this. And if there are things that don't fit right or don't seem right, you need to pull back. Like, there's a lot of responsibility on you at that stage. And I just thought, my goodness, like, can I handle all this responsibility to look after my body? Because, when you're in recovery, you're doing pretty much the bare minimum and letting your body essentially look after you by getting back your period and, restoring your energy levels and all that sort of stuff. So like now the role had reversed and I had to be this leader for my body. And I was very like out of touch with how to do that. And I mean, I decided to give it a shot. So I had Monday, I did my weight training, and then Tuesday I went to netball training. And obviously, like, I didn't participate in everything, but I was still running, and I hadn't run in like, 6, 7, 8 months at that point. And I remember I was due to ovulate, and I was seeing all of these signs for ovulation. And then literally that Wednesday morning, I woke up, Jade, and I was exhausted. Like, I was mentally, physically, and just emotionally done. And I remember thinking, I used to live in a constant state of this, like even now when I'm eating more food than I was in the past, I was still living in this constant state of exhaustion, and my body knew it. And I had seen all those signs of ovulation, and then no, she just switched off. She was like, we're not doing this again. I know what this is. And she was so smart. But I think what I learned from that experience, I felt really bad, but Sarah said to me, look, if we don't dip our toes in, we're never going to know what too much looks like. But I think the really big lesson I learned from that experience was, okay, this is what overtraining feels like. I'm going to pull back. I didn't exercise for the next week. I just went back to the basics. I ate more and I rested more. And I think that's something that recovery has taught me, is to really listen to my body, but also be reciprocal.
Yeah.
What's the right word for that? Like, to actually listen to it and be responsive. That's the word I was looking for, responsive. And responding to it and doing what she needs me to do when she feels a certain way. So if I feel too tired, then I don't go to the gym. And, if I want to have a nap, I have a nap. If I'm sick of studying, I have a break, like, I think that's a really big thing recovery has taught me, is just how to be responsive. Because it's one thing to listen to your body and be aware of what she is asking for, but then it's another thing to be like, okay, well, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And like a few things there about the reflection of the netball game. One, because how many minutes is a netball game? Like, how long would you have been running for?
Well, the training was like an hour.
Yeah. So if you think about, the way I look at things and sort of structure on the reintroduction of exercise, anything that's sort of cardio heavy or high intensity, that first one, sort of like 20 minutes, cap it. Done. Like, an hour is such a long time, but it's so easy to think it's not a long time when back in the day you used to do that all the time. It's like, yeah, it's only 60 minutes. But when your body's been so relaxed for so long, that's it. Like you said, the next day you're exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, because the amount of cortisol and adrenaline that would have been raging through your system just from that one workout. And then also because, it's a team training. So you don't want to have a rest because you kind of want to impress the people that you're training with. And there's that resistance, because I can see you grinning already before I finish my sentence. Yeah. And it's like, maybe through that session, did you start to go, oh, I should take a breather? And it's like, but I can't. The training goes for an hour.
So you literally hit the nail on the head, because I had to, when I felt exhausted, and because it took me so long to recover from that, like it took me a week to actually feel like myself again. I just thought, I can't do both. I can't play netball and train at the gym. Like, to move forward in my road to, exercising again, I'm going to have to pick one or the other. And I came to the decision of just stopping the netball and focusing on getting my fitness back and getting my strength back in the gym, because I could do that on my own.
You can control it, time,
exactly,
intensity, frequency.
Because and
also
if
your netball coaches aren't going to be responsive to your personal circumstance either.
No, well, I mean, I told them what was going on and they were really okay with it and everything, but I don't think I realized how sensitive my body was going to be. And I learned very quickly, but I came to that decision that I just couldn't give myself to a team yet, because I still wasn't a team with my body, and I still had to get to that stage before I could, be part of a team. And because I'm probably like you, and when you're in a team and if you're playing a team sport, you want to give your all to the team and you want to be there and you want to step up. And I just knew that my body wasn't capable of doing it at that point. So I just made the decision, netball's always going to be there. Right now, I need to focus on my health and my relationship with my body before I then go and add another variable that I can't necessarily control.
Yeah. And like, it's an important thing too about like dipping your toes in the water, because the thing is, you could have gone to that training and had a less intense response and your body could have been totally fine with it. Because I guess one of the scary things is you've put in so much effort to get your cycle back that the idea of losing it is terrifying and you don't want to make a mistake. But sometimes on the return to exercise, you kind of got to run the risk of making the mistake. And it's okay. Like if you accidentally overstep and as a result you skip ovulation or your period doesn't come, it's kind of part of the process. Like it's just as normal as weight gain is in HA recovery. It's okay, you might miss one sometimes, or you might not ovulate sometimes, but you're still learning how to care for this body that previously you just didn't know how to. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had HA in the first place. And just another thing about the exhaustion front, I recall something similar, which is, I used to train all the time. And some of the workouts I used to do, I remember I couldn't breathe. I'd be gasping for air. My legs felt like jelly. My lungs were on fire. These were CrossFit sort of workouts. And I felt like fatigued and tired, but it didn't feel that intense because then I'd go and train again later and I'd feel the same thing. So what I thought was normal for my body to feel was that constant state. And I didn't know it because I'd been desensitized because I always felt that way. And then much like you described, when I did start to add in intense exercise post HA, I remember, I think I might have gone for a run or maybe I did a row or something like that. And I remember I felt really good at the time, like completely fine. But once I stopped, I could literally feel my adrenaline raging. My muscles were tremoring, and it wasn't as in muscle fatigue tremors where it's okay. This was like a complete stress response, and I could literally feel a flight like response happening. And I remember having a shower and trying to just breathe and calm my body down because it was like raging. Even though I'd stopped exercising an hour earlier, my adrenaline was still running. And I was like, wow, like this is taking so much time to slow down. And look, my period did still come on time after that workout, but the lesson was still there. It's like, I don't need to cause this much stress to my body. And if I do want to be able to do the workout I just did, that's completely fine. But I need more gradual steps to get to that point, because I don't want to be finishing this workout in a position where I can tell my body's not coping and make that okay. Because my new standards, it's not okay. So, scale it back down, shorter duration, lower intensity for longer. There's so many ways you can play with it. And then now I've done a similar workout since, and my body was fine. Like, yes, I was tired. Yes, my muscles were a bit sore, but I didn't have that adrenal fatigue. I didn't have my heart in my throat and racing for goodness knows how long. And my appetite totally went. I couldn't eat for like 4 or 5 hours. Like I was just that first time. And I'm like, oh, see, there it is. And that's why I never had an appetite through HA, because I was working so hard all the time. Who wants to digest food? Like my system knows that. But it's things like that that are so important. Like sometimes when you overreach, it's like, oh, now I know what this stress feels like. Now I understand what I want to avoid. And if I still want that workout, like I said, it's like you don't have to avoid it. We just need more strategy to get there.
Yeah. And I love that. I think something that really stuck out to me that you said is your standards had changed. And I think that's what recovery teaches us, is that, our standards can change, and what the reasons why we exercise change, and I think there's nothing wrong with overstepping it. It definitely teaches you a lesson, but I think there's a difference between overstepping it and ignoring it, and overstepping and being responsive and making the adjustments that you need, and understanding that it is going to take that time. And then that just comes back to the whole patience part of recovery, and really trusting that your body will get you to where you want to go, but you have to be patient with it.
Yeah. And look, even on the sports performance side of things and adaptations, our bodies respond better through gradual increase. So the idea of actually scaling back so that you can cope through a workout better actually helps your cardio capacity. It actually helps growth of muscle mass. And sometimes it's easy to jump to the idea of, oh my gosh, I just can't handle anything. And it's like, no, but if you really want results, like let's say you really do want to get fitter for that just exact reason. I want a greater cardiovascular capacity, or on a better VO2 max, or I want to get bigger and stronger muscles. It's like, that's actually the protocol. That's what you're meant to do. If you're in an elite team, they don't just go, oh, you haven't run in a year? Okay, go run 10K. They don't do that. They know you're going to get injured. They know you're not going to be able to walk for a week. They know you're going to be sore and not be able to train the next day. And yet sometimes we get the idea of, oh, I haven't trained in a few months, but hey, I can go do this and I can go do that. And sometimes it's just take the excitement out and let's be rational about this. Let's be really sensible. What makes sense?
Yeah. And I think I had in my mind, I only ever wanted to give up exercise once. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it as, I'm not going to say as perfect, because you can't do it perfectly, but I want to do it as best as I possibly can. Because the last thing I wanted to do was get to that, finish line of my third recovery period. Was actually my fourth recovery period for me when I introduced exercise, and do too much too soon, and then lose my period, or delay ovulation, or delay my lengthen my cycle, and then really have to pull back again. Like I didn't want to have to do that. So I think that really helped me with my mindset of, okay, after my first period, I'm not going to change anything because I don't want to do this again. Okay, second period, I don't want to change anything because I don't want to do this again. Third period, I don't want to do this again, so I'm not going to change anything. And, I waited till my fourth period just because my cycles were really long, and I kind of wanted to get them around the 45-day mark before I introduced exercise, just so that I knew my body was progressing in recovery. Because even though I got my first, second, third, and fourth recovery period, things weren't perfect, like things weren't, and not even perfect's probably not the right word, but things weren't optimal. Like my cycle wasn't at its best yet. And I wanted to give my body the best chance of moving forward in a healthy way. So that meant waiting another 30-35 days to actually reintroduce exercise. Again, the patience and the trust that your body is going to get you to that finish line if you give your body what it needs to get there.
Yeah. Yes to just everything you just said, because it's there's so much to it, especially when you're experiencing it. I wonder what your take is. So obviously you build up trust for your body in order for your cycle to return. It's like you have faith in the process. You have faith that you can do it. And then you get your period back and you feel excited and liberated and fantastic about it. But then you want to return to exercise and you want to slowly up the intensity. And let's say you're in the position to do so. Like your cycle's going well, you've slowly been increasing. And it's time to probably challenge a HIIT workout or a run or a row. Did you ever also feel on the other side of the fence? Because, and this thought was mainly by the idea that I was terrified to go through HA again, which was I also didn't trust my body's ability to perform. Like I felt, I know I'd done all of it before. I know that I can be strong and fast and fit, but I almost felt like my body's a bit damaged because it can't cope with stress because of what happened. But if I'm being logical about it, what happened because I was in a super low calorie state and I was training 2 to 3 times a day, where now I train once a day and I eat a good amount of food. So you can't even compare the two, but it's really easy to put your new training methods and
Mm.
attach them to your old self. Did you ever get like that too? Where it's like you want to challenge it, but you kind of don't trust your body can cope. But of course it can. It feels like a real just tie, like tug of war. Tug of
Mm.
war. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think for me, it wasn't so much the workout side. It was probably more about like ovulation and trusting my body to continue to ovulate. Because I think for me, with my workouts, particularly towards the end, before I found out about HA and I recovered and stuff, they were a lot of high intensity stuff. And I can sit here and happily say, I don't need to do those anymore. Like, I didn't really enjoy them in the past because I was only doing them because I feared weight gain and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
However, I got excited to do my strength training again because I was ready to see these different results now that I was fueled and I had a normal, natural, regular menstrual cycle. I could work with my physiology. So I don't know if I ever like didn't trust my body's ability to do those workouts. I think it was more trusting my body. Well, in a way, trusting my body to handle them, and continue to ovulate a little bit. That was more so my biggest thing when it came to the trust, was even though I had all of these like, graphs of my temperatures that showed ovulation for the last 4 or 5 cycles, I still, even now, I still get a little bit like, oh, are we doing okay? Like, did I do too
Yeah.
much this cycle? And like, I think that's still pretty
Still
normal.
learning.
Yeah, and you're still testing the waters with different things. Like, I'm starting to lift a little bit heavier and it feels so great to be able to do this again. And I think I'm just kind of in like that almost like honeymoon phase with my workouts because I'm just enjoying them. And I
Yeah.
think obviously still being attentive to my body, but I don't think I could do all of this if I didn't take that exercise break. So I think that's really important to mention, because obviously this is, after all of that. And I don't think I could be looking at exercise in the way that I'm looking at it now, as this thing where I can get better and better at, instead of this thing that needs to be done so that I don't look a certain way. I don't think I could have gotten to this mentality and have this relationship with exercise if I didn't have that exercise break. And I know I've spoken to a couple other girls who've gone through HA recovery. One in particular, she never had to give up exercise because obviously that's not a requirement. You do need to knock it back quite a bit in most cases, but it's not a requirement to give it up. And the reason I gave it up is because I just knew that my relationship with exercise was really unhealthy. And I only noticed that it was unhealthy when I started to actually pull back on the exercise. And I was like, ooh, like something's wrong here. Like, this isn't a good relationship going on. Like, the fact that I used to feel a lot of anxiety around exercising, or until I'd exercise, I had guilt if I couldn't exercise. I'd literally plan out my week on a Sunday night by putting in, and this was in recovery, I plan my week by putting in my yoga
Yeah.
schedule, and I had to have it done every day. And that's when I was kind of like, ooh, this isn't healthy. Like, this is still the same behavior,
Still
but
obsessive.
I've just changed the exercise to be more restorative. But I've spoken to, someone else that's gone through HA recovery and they never had to give up exercise, but now they're really considering having a break to really make sure that they're doing exercise for the right reasons. So I think it is important to be able to step back and really look at what's going on. And like I said, like, I'm actually really grateful. And I know for anyone listening that's going through HA recovery and taking an exercise break, it's hard to imagine, but I am really grateful for taking that break, because it's given me a new outlook on exercise and my relationship with it, my relationship with my body, and my relationship with my body and exercise. It's just given me a different perspective of why I exercise, and I genuinely enjoy it. I love the days that I get to go and train. Whereas before, it was just, like I said, like a chore, like it was something I had to get done.
Yeah, and the why plays such a massive part, doesn't it? So I was training for 11 months of my sort of half in process, and then got sick of everything and threw in the towel and said, all right, I'm not doing it for 4 weeks. But I'm actually so grateful for that. And I'm actually glad my period didn't return when I was training an hour a day, because what I got from taking time totally off was so much more valuable than getting my period back while I was still training, because I had so many things in my mind where I couldn't be happy unless I got my workout in, or I just didn't feel good unless I started my day with exercise. Like I had all these little belief systems, like really deep set in my mind. And, you know, textbook wise, there's sort of healthy habits. Like, you know, most people go, oh, how can I enjoy going to the gym first thing in the morning? How can I start my day like this? How can I da 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 da? But for people that have sort of been obsessive with it, we feel like we can't survive without it. And that's stopping exercise actually showed me that exercise is more of an add-on to what makes me happy. It's not the foundation of what makes me happy. But when you spend so much time doing it, you start to believe it is the foundation. But realistically, the foundation of my happiness is me. It's my being. It's what I'm doing with my time. It's how my outlook is on life. It's what my goals are. And yes, you can still have exercise goals. Like I'm not demonizing that by any means. But when you're exercising because you can't wait to do it instead of I can't not, it's such a big difference. And also it teaches you the skill of learning when you need rest, because honestly, unless I took that full month off, I didn't really know what it felt like to not have any kind of feeling of DOMS, or like I didn't know that totally relaxed state, because even though I took a step back from my training, like it was nowhere near as intense as what it used to be. There was still tension throughout workouts. There was still an increase of heart rate for a small amount of time. There was all those sorts of things. And I actually got to learn what it felt like. And I remember one of the times, because the first week I felt like I got hit by a bus. I'm like, surely this isn't healthy. Like everything is aching. I'm so tired. What the F is this? Like, this is BS. I was angry. I was so angry. I'm thinking I'm meant to be rewarded for this break. And instead, you're making me feel like not good things. And then maybe 2 weeks later, I remember lying on the couch and my body felt light, and I was the heaviest I had ever been. And I did not feel light. I felt very aware of myself. Like I could feel my arms, I could feel my legs, I could feel everything all of the time. And suddenly I just remember lying on the couch being like, oh, I feel so light. But it was the muscles not being tense, and it was my adrenaline not running. And I sort of learned that feeling light isn't your weight, because that's what I used to believe. Feeling light is actually a mental and physical stress or lack of stress. So I'm forever grateful for witnessing that again, because if I hadn't have taken the time, I wouldn't know what my base is. I wouldn't know what it feels like to be totally relaxed. So now I can train, and that tension and stress slowly builds up. I can be like, oh, I'm a bit too far away from that relaxed state, or that like recovered state, I guess. Like you shouldn't be in a state of stress all the time anyway, regardless of your training cycle. But again, like it gave me grounding in so many more ways than just I can step away from exercise. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, it was incredibly freeing. So I think that's another thing recovery kind of taught me, was what freedom actually felt like, because for so long I just felt like I had to get up and exercise every day. Like I had to do this, I had to do that. And then, you know, freedom when it came to food rules and not having any food rules, and not analyzing, have I had too much fat today, or have I had, you know, have I had rice already, can I have rice again, you know, like all that sort of stuff. And that makes you feel really light. And without having that break and being able to step back from it all, I wouldn't be able to understand the difference.
Yeah. I take myself back to it, and I find it so bizarre how we get so lost from that throughout the journey. You know, because you can get HA 6 months into your health and fitness journey, you can get it 2 or 3 months in, and sometimes that's enough for you to kind of forget. But I have heard a few women sort of say that, let's say their HA happened later on in life, they are actually grateful that it happened later, because they remember what their life was like before their exercise and restriction with food kicked in. So they sort of had no, I used to actually be really happy and healthy with my old lifestyle. Like it's not foreign. Where I guess as someone who's younger and kind of entered their adult life as the fitness girl, you don't remember life before it. You kind of just remember early days of high school, and that's a blur. Like, you know, there's so much to learn and do. And process about high school that I knew I didn't like my weight, but it wasn't like a doing anything about it, and then I left high school and it's like, oh, I've got the power to do anything I want with my body. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's exactly what I did. So it's depending on where you experience HA, it can kind of be a blessing and a curse, because when you're learning about your new self, what are you supposed to do when you can't remember a different version of yourself?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's something that I learned throughout recovery, is like who I really was. I never really knew who I was. And I think I remember having this conversation with my partner years ago when I was still on the pill, and I just said, I don't have any direction in life. I just don't know who I am. And like in my early 20s, not to say that you have to have it all figured out in your early 20s, but just the person that I was, I figured I would. And I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I look back at it now and I'm like, I could have easily lived out the rest of my 20s and into my early 30s in this very, disordered mindset, because that's what it was. The way I looked at exercise, the way I looked at food, the way I looked at myself was completely disordered. And I think if HA hadn't have popped up when it did, I could still be quite unhappy with who I was as a human being and feel like I had no direction. You know, and that's the thing, is it's not just about getting your period back. Like, I really do believe I got my life back, and a life I didn't even know I was missing out on, because I never experienced it. Like the woman that you just mentioned, she got it later on in life and could look back and be like, oh, but I didn't have this. And, I had freedom this way. And I don't ever really remember that. Like, I remember bits and pieces of myself growing up. Like, I really loved to write and create things, but I never stuck with any of that when, I became the fitness girl and I was so dedicated to the gym and my eating habits and things like that. And it is a really good chance to reconnect and connect with parts that you didn't even know you had.
Because you evolve so much over time, like regardless of your circumstances, like you're always changing and evolving, and like what your values are will change, and a lot of them will stay the same because obviously they're your core values, but other things will shift as you sort of go along and you get older, and whether you study, work, have families, move countries, there's so many different things that can influence that. I was just thinking back to, you said something that really caught my eye and it's just left me now. Always the way. It was to do with, how you don't like know yourself outside of health and fitness. And at the time of recovering from HA, I've got it back now, is that the first part of it, it's like, why me? Why did I have to lose my period? I know so many women who train just as much as I do, and they eat just as little as I do, and they've still got a period, and they're still having babies, and da 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 da. You know the talk. Half of the people are listening or watching know the talk. And on the other side of the fence, and I have a different perspective, I am so glad I lost my period, because the thing is, if I didn't lose it, I never would have thought to reevaluate anything. And don't get me wrong, I was happy living the life I was living. Like, yes, I had downtimes, and yes, there was moments where I'm like, something's not right. And as I started to say it out loud, I'm like, oh, maybe you were, I was riddled with anxiety and da 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 da. But I was still a happy girl. Like, I don't have any regrets about that whole time. I had fun. I lived life, whatever. But if I think about living that life for another 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for the rest, it doesn't appeal to me at all. Like, it makes me think, oh, I'm glad I lived it because I learned so many things. But the life I'm living now is so much more fun and exciting and liberating on so many levels. And I'm just so grateful that HA forced me to learn about who I really wanted to become. Like, you might have heard that whole meme of no one's going to read out your body fat percentage when you die, like a eulogy. And it could be a young mindset thing, like you're not sure what your goals are. So that seems like the go-to goal to be the fitness cover girl image. But from once you've gone through all that and you've had to reassess, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many more goals I can have. There's so many more ways I can help people and love myself. And there's such a massive world of opportunity out there that you just aren't open to because you're so focused on everything else.
Yeah, I agree. And something that you said just really brought up kind of the very beginning of recovery for me. Like, I remember realizing what I had to do. And I think I ripped the Band-Aid off really quick because I knew if I didn't just kind of dive headfirst into recovery, I would talk myself out of it, because that's just because I'm a very much.
But it's more comfortable to talk yourself out of it because even though you're not necessarily happy living the life you're living, it's what you know. So there's comfort in that.
Yes, exactly. And, getting uncomfortable is when you're actually going to grow and you're going to, develop into a different version of yourself. So I'm glad I did it. I don't have any regrets with how I jumped into recovery. However, a couple of weeks in, I just remember being so upset, just beside myself. And people talk about mourning your old body, and I get that, but I was mourning my old lifestyle because I knew I was never going to live that way again. And I mean, at the time, that felt like a really big loss, because that's losing part of, or almost the whole of my identity, because that's what I tied myself to, right?
It's also how you spent most of your days training and thinking about food.
Yes.
So it's kind of at that point of your life, it was your core, and you're essentially about to remove it. Like, that's huge.
Exactly. So I felt like I was mourning that lifestyle, and knowing that, I was obviously going to go back to training, but I was probably never going to train at that intensity, frequency, and duration ever again. And not to say that you can't do that post recovery, but I just, for me, I knew that that wasn't what was going to happen. And, I kept telling myself, especially in those early days before my first recovery period, I can go back if I want. I can go back if I want. I'm really good at overtraining and starving myself to lose weight. I'm really good at that. So if this recovery gig doesn't work out for me, and I absolutely despise it and I hate what's happening, I'll go back. But the more I kept telling myself that and having that as an option, because it is an option, no one is forcing anyone to recover. That is always an option. But having it there in the forefront of my mind as a real possibility, the further I got into recovery, the more I was like, wait, why do I want to go back? I'm so much happier with who I am now and what I'm doing. And even though my body was changing, I was finally connecting with my body, because I'd always felt like a stranger. I felt like my mind and my body were just two separate entities, and they hated each other. They did not get along. So for the first time, I was really starting to understand my body, connect with my body, and accept my body, which was something I could never do when I was at my littlest. I still thought I had to do more, and nothing was ever good enough. More was never good enough, because once I got to that more stage, I wanted more. It was just this never ending cycle. So I think another thing that recovery just really taught me was, like, I could go back, but why would I want to? I saw this new life for me and I loved it.
Yeah, but what you've mentioned is like a massive part of, mindset training and working on those thought processes, and it's often the most common thing that pops up for women that have experienced HA as a result of high intensity training and too much of it. And, when that pops up, it's like, oh, I just feel so much better if I go back. Explore that thought. Like, don't sit there and there's a time to squash thoughts. 100%. There is times where certain thoughts are not serving you, and kick them to the curb. Like, you do not need to go through that. Just don't do it. But there's other times where it's a good thing to explore. And that is absolutely one question that is, I could easily go back to my old way. I was happy and healthier that way. All right. Were you actually happy? Could you go out for a birthday dinner whenever you wanted to? Could you have a sleep in? Could you do something spontaneous whenever you wanted to? Could you hang out with any groups of friends at any particular time? Could you go to any restaurant at any particular time? Did you have any dietary requirements that weren't essential, but like you made essential? Did you feel tired all the time? Did you feel excited all the time? Did you, the list goes on. And for the most part, because it's honestly a common conversation I have with women all the time, not necessarily clients, but just like Instagram DMs and stuff like that. And when you get into the nitty gritty of it, it's like what you desire is the comfort of your old lifestyle, is the structure and the predictability. And some of it's even just being an introvert, like just being so focused on yourself. Yeah, being so focused on yourself. And you get them to explore that and they go, oh, all right, so what I'm currently doing is really hard, but that's probably harder. And it's like, I haven't made them think that. You haven't made them think that. They've come across that by themselves. So if anyone listening or watching right now is sitting there going, oh, I could just go back to my old ways and it's fine, explore it more, like really dig into it. How much does that life excite you and make you feel great? And I know HA recovery time is hard. I know it is. Like we know it is. But the maintenance of your old lifestyle is pretty hard too.
It's exhausting.
And that's where the patience and the trust comes into it, because you need the time distance to be able to recognize it. Like if you're a week into your HA recovery listening to this, you're not going to believe us, even a month or 2 months, because you're still very emotional about it. You're still debating whether it's the right thing to do. You've still got other things going on. You're not sure what to do with all this time. You're feeling guilty. You're feeling like a new person. You might not want to be the new person. There's so much up there. But once you give yourself a little bit more space, you can actually assess and go, oh, like I went out with a friend for coffee and it was really nice. Or I decided to copy their food order and I had a burger instead of a salad. And you know what? I actually felt really energized after the burger. And yes, I felt bloated and I felt a little bit guilty, but for the most part, I felt pretty good. And they're also really good thoughts to explore, because it's okay, well, these new behaviors, they're scary. They might bring on some guilt, but what else do they bring on? Like you've eaten a high calorie meal food, and you feel uncomfortable, you feel guilty. But what else do you feel? Do you feel energetic? Do you feel like your emotions are present? Like you can tell if you're happy or you're sad? There's always more. And that's why I just love how you said that hindsight of, do you really want to go back to that old life? Because I can. And you could have easily turned around and gone, enough. I'm not meant to get my period, not meant to have kids, not meant to do any of this. I love training, dieting. I want to do it forever. And some women might make that choice. And again, it's their life. It's their decision. No one should be guilted for choosing what they want with their life. But give yourself some time to see the difference and explore both differences for anything and everything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I feel like I went on a massive rant.
I love that though. It was